Mike Brennan, and we're back on MITechTV, February 19th. And we're bringing back Richard Stiennon, who we have on usually once a month or so, and has a lot to talk about. Led by the idea or the story that I read last week that the Chinese have been in our infrastructure. That would be like the power grid, I imagine the water treatment, that sort of thing, all that jazz,
Yep.
for at least 5 years. And so, uh, you were saying, we were talking briefly, that the it's not that the government or the intelligence community may not have been aware of it, they just may have been watching them to see what was going on. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So when intelligence agencies finally, reveal something, it's only part of what they know, and they are very careful not to expose their own tactics and techniques. So they can't just say how they discovered them, for instance. So it's always lacking in real information. But in this case, they published indicators of compromise and some guidance, which we'll get to in a second, which is just awful, awful guidance and is embarrassing.
Oh,
Um,
jeez.
they've done all that this time around, but the media for the most part is treating this like a big surprise. And oh my God, those nasty Chinese makes you wonder a little bit about the political narrative, I guess. Why pick on China all the time? And I think that what's changed is that these types of attacks are not like cyber espionage, which goes back more than 20 years. This is, preparatory to cyber sabotage. Always
Hmm.
keeping in mind that the US has launched the most sophisticated cyber sabotage against a critical infrastructure. That was Stuxnet back in the 2007, 2008 timeframe. So it's,
So,
you know,
so why would this announcement come now? Why would this disclosure come now?
yeah, it's a great question. Maybe there is concern about China's recent saber rattling around Taiwan. And this might be a way to say, hey, we're watching you. We know what you're doing.
Hmm.
And there's always the subtle inference that we have also infiltrated your critical infrastructure. So if you attack Taiwan and at the same time, try and shut down communications in Guam, where the epicenter of these attacks or infiltrations are, we're going to shut off the lights in China, and which I'm sure the U.S. is perfectly capable of doing. So it's a game played at multiple levels of 3D chess, and we're not privy to it.
So you wrote a book, There Will Be Cyber War, back, gosh, I'm thinking 5, 6 years ago. Along these
Or
very lines, where
yeah,
you said the war, well, war is going on now,
yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
but it's being fought in cyberspace rather than physical space, So
yep.
that's essentially what's being carried over here. The Chinese are, and I'm sure the Russians and the Iraqi and the Iranians, and who knows how many people are sniffing around in there, right? So.
Yep. Yeah, and that book was the result of my master's thesis at King's College. And I was writing about the so-called cyber revolution in military affairs. RMA is a term coined by the US, but uh, really off of something that Russia was talking about in the 90s. China was really the first one to academically investigate cyber warfare. So they're kind of ahead of us in their military thinking. Certainly ahead of the United States, right? The United States is completely reactionary, does no forward thinking other than through a tiny little office inside the Pentagon. Um, the the Chinese have been basically just working on it for over 24 years that we now have recorded. Started with Titan Rain. That name may be familiar to you. A very young man, Sean Carpenter, now a good friend of mine, worked at Sandia Labs, right? So where we do a lot of nuclear weapons research and a whole bunch of other cool things. And he was just working at his first job as a security person after he came out of the Navy. And he's analyzing intrusion detection logs, and he recognizes an IP address that's poking around on their network. And he recognizes it as one he saw in another investigation on a Lockheed property in Florida. as malicious. So he starts tracking it and doing all the analysis and fun stuff that cyber sleuths do. And he found dozens of US research labs that were infected by these same attackers. And he backtracked them. He actually, from home, started hacking into the servers that they launched from. And he reached out to his employer at Lockheed and said, "Hey, I found all this stuff. We should tell all these people." And his boss said, "Mind your own business. Your job is to protect Sandia. Forget about the rest of that." And he didn't like that. So he went to a friend in military intelligence who put him in touch with the FBI. The FBI already had a named project, Titan Rain, to counter Chinese hacking. And there's dozens of Chinese attacks and infiltrating. The FBI back in the 2002, 2003 timeframe didn't know anything about computers at all. It just outrageously behind the times back then. And they basically came to Sean for all of their activity. So he helped them for over a year. And finally, the Lockheed, figured out what he was doing, and they fired him. And Sean successfully sued them for wrongful discharge. Is that the term? Wrongful
Termination, I think. Yeah, but go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. And so he settled. So we don't know how much he got, but he went on to do a whole bunch of other great things. So we know the Chinese are hacking us, right? And we have zero ability to prepare ourselves against it. And then you fast forward to, say, 2008, when the entire defense industrial base, so Lockheed and Sikorsky and the Tank Automotive Command, completely owned by the Chinese. They just walked in and stole everything. 20 terabytes, supposedly, was the reports at the time. That used to be a big number. It doesn't seem that big nowadays. And it was design data for our top 10 weapon systems. They stole the THAAD anti-missile system. They stole the Joint Strike Fighter, the F-35 design information, which we know turned into a Joint Strike Fighter of their own. So they copied the design and are flying it now. It's now their next generation aircraft. The Defense Industrial Base had a wake-up call, and they just got into security, and now they are easily the best at countering these types of attacks. As an example, 2 years later, RSA, the security division of then EMC, had a major attack from China. They stole the secret seeds to the one-time password tokens that 30,000 companies around the world use for strong authentication to get into networks. And at the time, RSA said not to worry. The likelihood of anybody using these secret seeds to break into your system, extremely low. 2 months later, this is 2010, Lockheed Martin detects an attack coming in with a spoofed secure ID token. And they shut down network access for all 80,000 employees. Imagine the ability to detect somebody who's faked a login token, right? How do they do that? And I went in and met with them, investigated, figured it all out. It's a pretty cool story. But it didn't end there. Shortly afterwards, we had the APT-1 report. So the first time that anybody had ever written up and researched the detailed attacks coming from China, that APT-1 report was a high turning point for the entire industry. Came out right before the RSA conference in San Francisco. People changed their business models after that report came out. As soon as we all realized what was going on, it was crazy, crazy times. So that just all leading up to, hey, they never stopped. It's probably a well-conceived plan, and we get little snippets of images of it as we suffer breaches, right? Like the breach against the Office of Personnel Management, OPM. They stole every single top secret, every single clearance and clearance application that had ever been submitted to the U.S. government. And they've got all that information on everybody, including who, uses drugs and who had an affair. And they got all the information they need.
Hmm. So you were saying that this report that the so-called Joint Cybersecurity Advisory that was recently released has some recommendations in it that you're not crazy about?
Yeah, I just come on. A if it's a major attack from a major attacker, right? Chinese, oh my God, these guys know what they're doing, right? They've got PhDs in hacking. And the advice is patch all your systems, use strong authentication. It's just same old, same old. In other words, do
It's the stuff we
security.
do at home, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Do security. And that I'm so tired of hearing CISA issue urgent demands that people patch systems, right? There is no IT administrator that doesn't already know that they have to patch systems, but there are reasons that you can't patch systems, right? They're critical. I mean, yeah, the last thing in the world that you want is DTE going out and patching all their computers because of a warning from somebody. Because one, something will break while they're doing that. There'll be a snowstorm, systems were down, because we're doing regularly scheduled maintenance and now we can't respond properly. Be a total disaster if they did that to their probably thousands of systems. And besides that, we're living in a post-solar winds era. So solar winds was an attack by Russia against a company called Solar Winds, where they modified the software before a patch was pushed out to all their customers. 18,000 customers were exploitable, many of them exploited, by a software update that was installed on purpose. If you tell everybody to patch all of a sudden, what a perfect play for the Chinese to get their backdoors installed.
Speaking of the Chinese, if the Taiwan situation boils over into some kind of conflict, how do you see that playing out in terms of cyberspace?
Well, I think it'll be major back and forth. Don't forget the book you referenced earlier was um, uh, the entire change of the U.S. military to network-centric warfighting came about during the Taiwan Straits crisis of 1995. The admiral in charge of the Seventh Fleet had, just gotten internet religion like we all did in that same time frame, right? He discovered the internet. He walked around. He was put in charge of the IT systems for the Navy. He was walking around with a MacBook portable that had 25 megabytes of memory.
Ooh,
Um, yeah, it's the PowerPoint slides that I use to talk about this are bigger than that. But basically, when he was put in charge of the Seventh Fleet, he hired as his direct staff, he chose people who had AOL accounts like he did. So he needed a sub person, a surface person, and a logistics person, shipping and base person. And they all had AOL accounts, so they all would communicate with each other while they're at sea and at base and all this. It was amazing, instantaneous communication. And they planned a response to Taiwan's shooting missiles into the strait across Taiwan, or China's doing that across Taiwan, and executed it in hours from the Joint Chiefs of Staff's meeting in the Pentagon, with real-time video being sent back of some of the locations they were talking about all over the internet. And after that, just warfighting just changed completely from that moment. So here we are. We still haven't had China invade Taiwan, which to me is always a sign that, hey, China is a rational actor, right? It's not like Russia, which is completely irrational. So we can still treat China as we do a traditional adversary, right? We can negotiate with them. We can have treaties with them. And we can carry on this subterfuge of a silent cyber war going on between the two of us.
So what is up with Russia lately? We hear about all the hacker farms in St. Petersburg and other places in Eastern Europe. What have they been doing, especially in terms of the Ukraine war lately?
Yeah, so Ukraine's been under a constant barrage. They've taken out satellite communications in Ukraine. And of course, there's probably a lot of electronic warfare going on to jam signals to drones, etc. We've had apparently Elon Musk, somehow the Russian forces also use Starlink for their communications, which they buy through third parties in the Middle East. So now you have both sides getting their situational awareness through Elon Musk's satellite network, which is
Hmm.
it's kind of ironic, but that's probably typical of how it works.
It's kind of like the arms dealers dealing with both sides.
Sure.
War is a
Right.
wonderful thing for arms dealers because they can sell to everybody, right? And
Yep.
have no compunction, shall we say,
Yep.
about doing that. So,
Yeah, yeah. It actually reminds me of when the Free Press was going on strike. The writers were going on strike, and I was at RustNet. I was hosting the Detroit News website, and then the strikers came in to me, and I hosted their website as well on the exact same Silicon Graphics server.
Well,
I was an arms dealer, yes.
that's it, Richard,
Yep.
the
okay,
arms dealer.
all right. Well,
Uh,
it almost reminds me the Elon Musk thing. It almost reminds me of a Bond villain. I mean, it's getting to that point almost, where the amount of power that these folks have is just amazing.
yeah, yeah. I was in an argument with somebody over, there's there's almost a trope out there that the cybersecurity industry is too big. There's too many vendors. They've got to consolidate. There should be 4 or 5, and that's all we need. And somebody's using my favorite analogy, which is to the automotive industry. So I was looking into it and realized that Elon Musk could have bought General Motors for less than he paid for Twitter.
Sure.
And that would have made a lot more sense. Could have done something, that Ross Perot failed to get done. It's
There's a
crazy.
lot of,
Would have been a lot smarter real estate deal anyway. I mean,
That's for
geez.
sure. You would have had some real assets, yeah.
yeah, he's a
Would have been
character.
horrible for the employees, of course, but
So also another thing that crossed my transom is AI once again being the bad guy here in the sense of
yep.
I think I can't remember who was reported at Microsoft or somebody,
Microsoft, yeah.
yeah, saying that the bad guys, the hackers, are using AI to get even better. What do you
Yep.
think of that?
Yeah, well, first, this story isn't as interesting as the one that's probably actually happening because this story is about how they're using, their access to Bing and OpenAI chatbot to craft better emails, right? Because we're all familiar with the poorly written Russian emails, especially when they're extorting or getting ready to leak a whole bunch of stuff. Um, but we have used OpenAI to write those. So I'm using it, practically every day to write difficult emails when you got to, kind of correct somebody's behavior or complain about something, and just instead of sitting there thinking so hard and engaging your brain so much, just edit whatever OpenAI creates for you. So, but obviously the cutting edge of hacking is in code and developing exploits. And if you're just creating normal code, OpenAI has changed the world for that. And but Microsoft's got a version of it called Copilot. Basically, as a developer, you just say, I've got this and I want that. Write me the code in whatever language that you choose, and it gives you the code, and it's good. Um, and it's 10x the productivity of developers everywhere. And that's just in the last 14 months now that's happened. And that's why I'm so excited about what's going on right now is that when you see dramatic increases in productivity, that's when the economy takes off and you get the bubbles that we had in 1995. I'm convinced that we're entering that right now. It'll be this year that things start to skyrocket and we'll take our breath away. Um, it's going to be amazing, and the hackers are going to take advantage of that as well. Now, all the tools are trying to build in things. You can't just say, "Hey, find me a 0-day vulnerability in Microsoft Word." You can't do that. It'll just not let you do that, and they're trying to be very careful about protecting against that.
So what does this do to all the people who, mouthed off to us humanities majors, "Hey, learn to code"? I
Yeah,
guess that's gonna, I guess that's gonna go out the window too. Huh?
it is already out the window. Yep. And now, mind you, if your job is to write, you're
Oh, I know.
you're also challenged. It always bugged me that every time I heard about AI, they were talking about natural language processing, and it was as if a whole bunch of geeks found writing difficult, so they're going to create a computer program to write for them. It really felt that way. And I kept saying, why not apply that to coding? Because coding is determinative. It doesn't have nuance. And turns out it just fell out of everything they were working on. Just amazing.
Hmm.
So, exciting times. And the one thing that attackers, be they working at the NSA or the GRU, um, develop a lot of code, and they're going to be in a position to be better at it, and to figure out how to automate their attack scenarios so that they can just sit back and let them run. And we'll be in that phase that I've been expecting for several years, which is automated attacks requiring automated defense. So now the code's going to be actually fighting amongst themselves.
Oh my gosh. So it is robo warfare, just in a different sense than
Yep.
maybe we thought with the giant mechas. Huh?
Exactly.
I have we do have a couple writers here at the digital marketing firm I now work for, who have tried using AI and Chat GPT to write stuff for them, and they maintain that the language is still a little bit flowery and overly larded with adverbs and value
Oh,
judgments and that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So
esteemed somebody or other, all that stuff. It's still a little rough. I can tell when I'm reading AI copy, but go ahead.
but it's
Yeah,
only going to get better. That's the scary
yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
So,
and you can get it a lot better than just out of the box by doing a whole bunch of prompt engineering. So you literally
mm,
tell it, you are Hemingway, and you're going to write in a simple monosyllabic style, and you're not going to use adjectives or adverbs, and it will, and it comes out amazing. I was doing a demo for Detroit working writers last week, just to get them over their fears, because a lot of writers are very afraid of AI and they think they should be suing, and oh my gosh, my writing is they're profiting from it. And I like to tell them, look at you've got if OpenAI in particular has gathered a vast majority of everything written by humans ever, and we're talking ever,
mm.
um, and if it's incorporated that into this, body of knowledge, this ethos of who we are as humans, and you can ask it questions and ask it to do stuff for you, would you like to opt out of being part of that? In other words, for the rest of history, eons from now, if your words were incorporated into the original model, you will have an impact on the future.
Hmm.
Would you like that to be yanked out? Are you John Grisham, who joined the Authors Guild lawsuit against OpenAI? Do you want all future human thought to not be influenced by John Grisham? I'm going, yes, that would be a good thing. But um, he probably doesn't think that's a good idea, and that's what he's suing for.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, coming down the home stretch here, I guess one last thing we should always mention is the bad guys are getting really good at phishing attacks, and that's how a lot of this stuff gets into various networks. Is some idiot somewhere clicks on a phishing email, and suddenly all this malware is downloaded. So, what percentage of the attacks really come from that? It's got to be a pretty high number, right?
I've seen 87%. Yeah. Yep.
Mm.
And even the SolarWinds attack was initiated by a phishing email. So it's so hard to be vigilant constantly, right? Um, and hopefully you've got systems that are well protected. You got some good anti-malware on your system. I personally love not using anything to do with Microsoft, so that because Microsoft owns the space, the attacker is going to develop exploits against their system. So just get out of that. just use MacBooks, use all Apple stuff, and you just won't succumb to the same things, right? If they are really after you, no problem. There are plenty of vulnerabilities that they could exploit, but they're not after you. They're after anybody that's willing to click.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of emails. Click now because you just won something or other, or
Yeah.
and it's pretty obvious what's going on. So I just instantly delete those. So,
Yep.
but
Delete,
anyway,
block, report as spam. Help us out.
oh yeah, yeah, all that stuff. So anyway, so how's the book sales goes? We'll close with that. How you doing with the book?
Uh, it's going awesome. I'm getting. I have to get rid of the last 600 copies before April 30th, because after that, my new publisher Wiley won't allow me to, sell them or distribute them. So I'm finding some good places on the East Coast that I have a lot of students that want to get into cybersecurity, so I'm donating a lot of them out there.